lover of a grand opening. Embodiment of that's the ticket. Not your regular. This is Emily.
And this is how I bake it.
Big binders of information, studying, preparing, having a great amount of facts at his command. President Trump, of course, is a man who's about instinct, he's about his own abilities, and he likes to think on his feet in real time.
And our colleague Yamiche Alcindor has been reporting that President Trump is preparing to get personal to launch attacks against Joe Biden and his family. What do we know about how Biden plans to respond and whether he's going to return in kind?
Speaking to reporters today, Dan, the Biden campaign didn't directly answer how they will respond. Instead, they brought out what they've done before. Their message being that they don't think it's an appropriate line of attack to go after Hunter Biden.
About who has the best football team, or having a debate at a local bar that is far more around the atmospherics and the emotive and less around the logic of arguments, and that was powerfully successful for him in 2016. So there's no reason for him to change up.
Ed, we know that both of these candidates are very outgoing, very emotional. Do you think that Chris Wallace will have to step in and kind of get them back on track at any point?
The problem that I don't think that Chris Wallace has decided to play that particular role as a moderator, and that in fact no moderator has been successful at doing that. When I went back and looked at some of the 2016 debates with President Trump, that both the candidates and the moderators struggled with figuring out when he would speak, how long he would speak, and that the moderators extracting themselves from that particular role seems to be the best thing to do, because it backfired on the moderators, sent some messages around whether or not they were being impartial, what role that they played, and it's going to be left up to Joe Biden to figure out how to manage the way, in the unorthodox way in which Donald Trump chooses to use this particular forum.
Yeah, and speaking of this particular forum, we have some changes this year. It's mid-pandemic. There's not going to be that typical crowd size that President Trump is used to from his rallies. So do you think that is going to kind of deter him in his usual attack method?
I don't know if it will deter him from the usual attack method. I do think that this is one of the areas that there's a downside risk for him. That I think that one of the things that makes Donald Trump a brilliant communicator is that he has the capacity to read the needs of an audience and to respond to those particular needs. There are times in which he's off at doing that, but more often than not, he is really good at delivering a coherent and concise message at that moment that cuts through what the audience needs. And absent having that energy that comes from a large crowd, that comes from the reactions that he's getting from the audience, I would have some concern if I'm part of the campaign that maybe he gets a little bored with what's going on over the next 2 hours, and he seems to be lethargic, and he seems to be uninterested because he's not feeding off of that energy that's there. It's not going to deter him from his usual style and at his attacking manner. But I do think that during those moments of lull when Joe Biden is speaking, what are the non-verbals that he's sending out? Tremendous amount of our communication is done non-verbally. And that those are the things I will be looking at. How does he comport himself when Joe Biden is speaking, when there are conversations about things that he doesn't usually find interest in?
Ed, here's the big question. Do you think there's going to be a handshake?
No. And I think that Ultimately, the reason why you can explain there won't be has nothing to do with animus between these two candidates, but it has everything to do with the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And from Joe Biden's perspective, he wants to adhere to all of the public health norms that are there in order to message that the coronavirus is a serious issue and we need to take it seriously, even in the moment of a debate and even when need to dismiss with pleasantries like a handshake.
Ed, on your end, what are your expectations? Do you feel like Biden's going to go home with the W or President Trump?
So I would think that there are sort of two ways of thinking about who wins this debate. I ultimately think that the question of the answer to that is, what are you talking about tomorrow morning? If you are talking about the coronavirus tomorrow morning, Joe Biden has won this debate. If you're using the magic number of 750 tomorrow morning in talking about this debate, Joe Biden has won the debate. Conversely, if you are having a conversation about trade deals that have decimated the manufacturing sector and created a tremendous amount of unemployment in flyover country of the United States, as Donald Trump identifies it, then I think he has won this debate, particularly if you're connecting that to Joe Biden's support for NAFTA and TPP and Joe Biden's inability to explain those particular issues. That ultimately, whoever is doing the best job of connecting the economy to the issues that are at hand is the one who will win this debate. And I actually think that there's a tremendous opportunity for Donald Trump to do some of the things he did in 2016 that was really successful in garnering a tremendous amount of support by explaining the ways in which the economy, jobs, unemployment is directly tied to the federal government and what actions the president takes.
All right, one of the last questions for you, Ed. We've seen some big bombshells come out, including that report coming from the New York Times. Do you think either candidate has something up their sleeve that might surprise us tonight?
I don't think that we have seen the October surprise in August and September, and I dare say that we will see some that will occur in October. I don't think that we will be surprised at this evening with any tradition, any bombshell. My concern for either candidate trying to use this as a gotcha moment is that it has such an opportunity to backfire because the nation is really yearning for a conversation around how are we going to get back to a sense of normalcy? How do we deal with this pandemic? How do we deal with the tremendous amount of unemployment? And a candidate that comes across as being uninterested or unwilling to have a conversation about these things will be a candidate that loses a tremendous opportunity to gain some additional support.
All righty, Dr. Ed Lee right there. Thank you so much for joining us. If anything, this should be a very entertaining event.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much. Again, you are watching News Now from Fox. That was Dr. Ed Lee. He is a specialist when it comes to debates. He kind of broke down exactly what we can expect for this upcoming debate. So exciting stuff right there. Andrew Kraft, my co-host, sat down with some of the nation's best political reporters, all coming from Fox. So we're going to tune in to that virtual roundtable right now on News Now from Fox. Thank you so much for joining us.
And with the first presidential debate this evening, we wanted to get perspective from across the country on topics that will be discussed by the candidates. And for this conversation, we're joined by Fox 5's Tom Fitzgerald out of Washington, D.C., Claire Sims from Fox 5 Atlanta, and Mike Flannery with FLD in Fox 32 in Chicago. But Tom, let's begin with you. What is the feel in D.C. and on Capitol Hill ahead of tonight's debate? What are your sources saying?
Well, you know, on two levels, on a local level and a national level. Look, politics, you know, is the local sport here in Washington. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, we're not going to see the usual things we see in this city. There's not going to be any big bars having watch parties. There's not going to be big gatherings of partisans like we see every 4 years when debate time rolls around. That's history this year. But, that's the spectator sport of this. The real, nuts and bolts part of this is that Donald Trump, as he enters this debate tonight, is now saddled with this story that has taken over this city tonight. This story out of the New York Times alleging that the president only paid, federal income taxes 2 of the last 15 years. It has completely washed over the news cycle here, and all eyes right now are on the president to how not only he talks about this when he's asked about it. We're expecting he is going to be asked about it, but also how Joe Biden deals with this, because Joe Biden has been trying for days now to keep the focus on healthcare, keep the focus on COVID-19 and the coronavirus pandemic. Then we were met with the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, then the news cycle over her replacement on the court, according to the president, Amy Coney Barrett. Now this is just yet another thing that pushes Joe Biden away from that goal of keeping all eyes on the coronavirus pandemic.
That's right. Now, Fox News' our own Chris Wallace will moderate tonight. And last week, he released the 6 topics the candidates will cover. And just for our viewers, they are Trump and Biden's records, the Supreme Court, coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic, the economy, race and violence in our cities, and the integrity of the election. Now, Claire, Joe Biden's record is something that President Trump has been targeting for a while, and we hear it a lot at the president's rallies. He says Joe Biden has 47 years of experience compared with the president's 47 months. Now, is that something you expect will continue tonight?
Well, absolutely. It would not be a debate if they didn't go after each other. And of course, the big difference here, though, is going to be the flavor of that. So President Trump has long touted himself as a political outsider. He is a political outsider. He never ran for office until that 2016 presidential run. But he used that outsider status to really break through that huge number of Republican candidates we saw in 2016. And I think the playbook is going to be very similar. Those were people with political backgrounds. Joe Biden, as you mentioned, 47 years in the political sphere. So the president is really going to use that to his advantage to sort of differentiate himself. And it's something that we saw once he was whittled down to the Republican nominee back in 2016. It really worked to his advantage against Hillary Clinton. He not only went after her record, but also her husband's record, former President Bill Clinton.
That's right, Claire. Now, Mike, the former Vice President Joe Biden has been attacking the president's record on the coronavirus. But where else can we see Biden attack Trump tonight?
Well, I think, as Tom said, those income taxes open up a huge number of opportunities for Biden to attack. I will say, I think, though, that the president in the weeks leading up to this has made a tactical error. He has effectively lowered the bar for Biden's performance here, labeling him Sleepy Joe. Many of the president's allies have suggested that Joe Biden doesn't even know what century it is, that he's not going to be. So it reminds me of a long ago mayoral election here in Chicago where the opposition held rallies and they would chant "Dum Dum Daley" about Rich Daley, and the first time he ran for mayor back in the 1980s. So came the debate. All Daley had to do was form a few English language sentences, offer some thoughtful proposals, and people were like, well, wait a minute, he's not a dumbo. I think the president may live to regret some of that setup for this debate. But I do think that Biden, for the first time, we know with Chris Wallace, he's going to face aggressive questioning. There will be follow-up questions. I'm not sure that we've seen Biden in that kind of sustained forum. This is going to go on for quite a while. There's going to be some back and forth. And we'll see just how well Biden measures up.
That's right, Mike. We haven't seen former Vice President Joe Biden sit for many interviews with very, very skilled inquisitors like our own Chris Wallace. He's been trying to get an interview with the former Vice President. But let's switch gears here. I mean, Tom mentioned this earlier. The Supreme Court has just been on the top of the mind of everyone since the passing of Justice Ginsburg. And President Trump just this past weekend nominated Judge Amy Coney Barrett to fill her seat on the High Court. How often do you think that'll be brought up tonight? And what is it resonating with voters, Democrats and Republicans? Do you think it'll drive turnout as well?
Well, we know it will be brought up. It's one of the subjects that Chris Wallace has already announced that will be part of the 6 that he is going to be talking about. If I can just add one thing to the end of what Mike said there, because he's absolutely right about what President Trump publicly has been saying about his opponent in these debates, Joe Biden. However, there's a subtext going on here, which we've heard over the last couple of days, Mike, from the Trump campaign. And what they're saying is quite a contrast with what the president's been saying. They've been saying, well, you know, Joe Biden, he was in the world's greatest deliberative body for decades. He's a skilled debater. He's an experienced debater. And they also have been pointing out his performance against Paul Ryan and Sarah Palin in his previous vice presidential debate. So it's a very interesting contrast. Mike's absolutely right. The president's been taking at length to say, you know, these things about Sleepy Joe. But privately, we're hearing from the Trump campaign itself, though, that they are taking Joe Biden a lot more seriously than the president's public statements would suggest. On the Supreme Court, look, the Democrats know, they know that the Republicans have the votes to pass this nominee. Even though the Democrats are saying they will fight this, they will oppose this, at the end of the day, Lindsey Graham has already said he's calling this hearing of the Senate Judiciary Committee on October 12th. He will send this nomination to the full committee by October 22nd, and he expects the Senate to vote on this by the end of next month. That much we know. What we don't know quite yet, though, is where Joe Biden stands on this issue of packing the court. A lot of Democrats have been talking about this possibility of expanding the number of justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, it's happened before, not since the 1800s, but it would be a radical shift for the legislative makeup to suddenly start putting more justices on the court based upon which political party happens to hold sway over the White House and the Senate at the same time. So expect that to be one of the questions that we're going to hear. Is Joe Biden in favor of packing the U.S. Supreme Court and adding more justices that see things the way he does?
Tom, that's right, and we've heard from
Joe Biden wants to duck. He doesn't want to answer that stuff, and I think, you know, Amy Coney Barrett, she's on the U.S. Court of Appeals based here in Chicago. I mean, even people who don't like her political point of view acknowledge her brilliance, acknowledge the warmth, the sense of humor that she displays. I think, you know, in this upcoming Senate hearing, we're going to see a lot of that. I don't think Biden wants to get on the wrong side of that. And this issue of her conservative Catholicism, her being a Roman Catholic, she graduated the Notre Dame University Law School just a few miles from here. She taught there for 15 years. I don't think Biden wants to get on the wrong side of that either. I'll be real interested to see, and Chris Wallace is going to have to follow up with several questions on all of this stuff to try to nail Biden down. He's trying to duck it because he doesn't want to offend the left wing of the Democratic Party.
And Claire, just to bring up, you know, Obamacare arguments in front of the Supreme Court start November 10th. And the Biden campaign is really hitting that hard, telling, you know, their base, their voters, hey, look, you know, your health care is at risk if Judge Coney Barrett is going to be on the court. And that'll obviously be brought up tonight.
Oh, definitely. I actually talked to our Attorney General here in Georgia. He's one of the Attorney Generals who signed on to that lawsuit and is very interested in Judge Barrett becoming the next Supreme Court Justice for the United States, because he knows that that is going to be heard shortly after the election. And that's one of the reasons why Republicans here in Georgia say, well, we absolutely have to confirm someone as quickly as possible. That is definitely in the back of their minds, that they would have this conservative majority on the court And I know in the past from doing research on Judge Barrett that she has said some negative things about the Affordable Care Act. And so I think they feel like she would be on their side. Although we've also heard a lot of people who say, she's really a prudent student of the law and will do what the law dictates, and may not be just as blanket a blanket conservative vote on the court as you might suspect.
And Claire, just speaking again about health care, we're in the midst still of the pandemic. Nearly 1 million people have died worldwide, including more than 200,000 here at home. But President Trump's response to the virus has been something Biden has hammered since, early March. And President Trump maintains, he closed the border to China. He got states ventilators in time, Operation Warp Speed with vaccine progress. Will tonight's debate primarily focus on the coronavirus pandemic?
So debate watchers I've talked to have said that if former Vice President Biden can keep the debate centering around COVID-19 and the coronavirus response, that it's going to be a win for him. Every Democratic candidate on the ballot here in Georgia has been hammering the COVID-19 pandemic and what they see as a lack of response from the federal government. And here in Georgia, that has really trickled down to our governor. Governor Brian Kemp is a staunch Trump conservative. The president's endorsement helped get him sort of over the hump when he was in a runoff with a fellow Republican candidate. And so he has really been walking a very fine line, making sure that he is in line with what the president has been saying about COVID-19. And despite calls from a lot of people here in Georgia to mandate masks, he's never done so. So I think Democrats really want the failure or what they describe as a failure of leadership from the Oval Office to be a central point here, a central issue in November. They see it as a winning issue. And it also goes hand in hand with what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, the Affordable Care Act. There are a lot of people here in Georgia who are concerned about coverage for pre-existing conditions. We have ads here in Georgia running saying, keep in mind, COVID-19 is a pre-existing condition, and we had a spike not too long ago. And so there are a lot of Georgians who are concerned about that, and I think it will be a big issue as we move forward.
And obviously, the coronavirus pandemic has affected the economy as well. Building the economy was one of President Trump's platform promises in 2016. Pre-pandemic, the unemployment rate was at 3%. Now it's almost at 8%, I think 8.4 is the latest number. His base felt he delivered on that promise. But Mike, is this a spot where the president can shine and tout his record, or have the past 6 months kind of put too much of a damper on that and blown that part of his administration out of the water?
I think the polling shows that it really is in the eye of the beholder here. I think if for those who are in the president's base, those glory days of 3% and change unemployment are what to point to, and that's where the president promises to get us back to. For those who are not admirers of the president, though, the unemployment, the coronavirus, I mean, as Claire has been pointing out, and Tom has said, I mean, we'll see how skillful Joe Biden is in making these connections. The messaging of Democrats out here in the Midwest in the past week or two, and certainly since the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has been all about health care, COVID, Obamacare, the court, that case that comes up just a few days, the court will hear just a few days after the November 3rd election. All of that is linked. And the economy, they don't talk about that so much.
And we just want to bring Tom in here, too, as well. Congress has yet, if at all, to pass another round of coronavirus relief. But we want to bring in also the New York Times report about the president's tax records as well that you mentioned earlier. If they're seeing the president that they support, not paying any federal income tax for the last 10 years, what does that say about his message on the economy?
Well, look, the president has a base of about 40% of the electorate that is going to be with him no matter what. So what's at stake in this debate for both of these candidates is to talk to that middle ground, to those blue-collar independents who have, not made up their mind about this race. The danger for the president here is that when he gets in forums like this, he does tend to talk to his base. One of the skills he's going to have to put on display in this debate is the ability to branch out, to go to the underside. Look, it's, late September here. People who are probably going to vote for Donald Trump are probably going to vote for Donald Trump no matter what he does in this debate. Likewise with Joe Biden. But there is a pool of voters out there that have still not made up their minds. And this first debate is the most critical of them all, because by the second, third debates, they may have already made up their minds. This news on the taxes, there's no way to shake this out. This is not good news for the president. But to Mike's point, as we look at the economy right now, there are so many drivers of people's fears, worries, and concerns right now that to go back out there and start talking about the good times of 2016 might seem woefully out of step with where people's heads are right now. And on top of all of that, we haven't gotten to it, but, we have a severe issue with race relations in this country right now. That's also going to be one of Chris Wallace's topics, and that is tied in to all of this as well as to how these candidates shape moving forward from this point, not just recounting what we've all already experienced in 2020.
Now, Tom, as you just mentioned, obviously...
And I want to jump in real quick,
Sure,
if
yeah,
I
go
may.
ahead. Yeah.
Well, so we're talking about those undecided voters, and polling shows us that there really are a small number of people who are undecided. And those are the ones who really ultimately will make the decision, put one candidate over the top. But I was talking this morning to a Emory University debate expert, and his name's Dr. Ed Lee here in Atlanta. And what he mentioned that I thought was so smart was it's not about the undecided voters. It's about the unengaged voters, the disengaged voters who don't turn out. Those are the ones who President Obama was able to get to turn out for him in 2008 and in 2012. Those are the ones that they really need to be reaching out to. And I think something like Trump's taxes or COVID-19 or losing your job because of COVID-19, those are the things that really put people over the top and make them want to go to the polls. And like you said, this first debate is so critical because here in Georgia, the registration deadline for November is October 5th. So this debate is going to determine whether somebody is inspired enough to go and register to vote and able to cast a ballot in November. So I think that's really critical.
That's right, Claire. And just to bring up polling, wanted to tell our viewers the Real Clear Politics polling average for this week has Biden up by 6%. And some Fox News polls that were just released over the weekend, too, has Biden up in states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. Want to switch gears here again to something Tom alluded to. Now in 2020, President Trump has been running all summer on this platform of law and order amid the social unrest happening in the wake of the death of George Floyd in May. Protests and some riots across this country, especially in Chicago, in the wake of killings by police of people of color. Mike, will this platform resonate? And is this a spot where the president can shine in the debate? He's tied former Vice President Biden, his supporters are just like Antifa. He's said that multiple times. Mike, what do you think of that?
Well, Chicago is a city, while the whole political apparatus here and across the state of down in the state capital, Springfield, is Democratic and opposed to Trump. The help that Bill Barr offered in terms of several hundred, I think it was 300 additional FBI, ATF, DEA agents, etc., and some people from Homeland Security, the mayor here did accept, unlike in Portland, unlike in other cities. Bill Barr came and was bragging about some of the decline in the violence that has resulted since those hundreds of federal agents in Chicago. So, look, that is a huge issue here. That is something on which, unlike in other parts of the country, the Democrats here are willing to take help. Jeff Sessions in the first year, in 2017, when he was the Attorney General. He came out here and was greeted by a number of the local political yokels who were thrilled that he was sending additional FBI and ATF agents at that time. So, yeah, that has some appeal here. But as 538.com ranks the state of Illinois, there is a less than 1% chance of Donald Trump carrying Illinois. So I don't think it's going to turn things around for him here.
And Claire and Tom, feel free to jump in. Obviously, you both live in cities that have been racked by these protests this summer. And like I said before, the president and his campaign are trying to tie Biden to these Antifa protesters and these rioters throughout the summer. But is it sticking, and has Biden done enough to denounce it?
Well, now I'll jump in here. Joe Biden has been painfully shy of press conferences throughout this entire summer. Yes, there's a COVID-19 pandemic that's been going on, which has limited his travel. But, the access to candidate Joe Biden has been slim. He comes out and he makes statements at somewhat irregular intervals. We heard from him last night briefly about the tax situation. But no, we do not get a steady, full-throated statement from Joe Biden on this. I suspect it's one of the things that he is going to be pressed on in this debate. Not only his reaction to all this, but what do you do about it? What are you going to do about race relations in this country? What are you going to do about the relationships between police departments, law enforcement agencies, and the communities which they are sworn to protect and serve? So, again, it's not just identifying the problem. When you get on that debate stage, you have to tell the American people what you're going to do about that problem. And, as of yet, Joe Biden has not gotten out there forcefully to denounce some of the more radical, violent elements that we have seen in these demonstrations. Washington, D.C., we were a city that, had federal troops literally spill out onto Lafayette Square here and dispense crowd control and tear gas measures to clear a crowd. That was one of the most remarkable things a lot of people who lived in this city say they'd ever seen in their lives. So this is going to be front and center, right up there with everything else we've already talked about. Give you the Supreme Court, give you the economy, give it COVID-19. But the state of civil rights, social justice, and policing in this country, that's going to be right up there.
And just finally, the last topic, the integrity of the election will also be discussed. President Trump has been casting doubt for months now, claiming the election will be fixed because of mail-in ballots. And you're seeing more people than ever are choosing to send their ballot via mail this time because of the pandemic. Claire, do you expect the president to keep up this line of reasoning, and how can Joe Biden push back on it?
Well, I absolutely think the president is going to continue. It's something that has really sort of taken a little bit of a hold here in Georgia. We had over 1.5 million people request absentee ballots for our June primary. And for context, our presidential preference primary was supposed to be in March. It got pushed back and combined with our May primary for the other races, and then that again got pushed back until June. And the Secretary of State here in Georgia, who is a Republican, actually sent absentee by mail request forms to every active voter in the state ahead of the June primary because of concerns about safety and going to the polls in person. Now, he's not doing that for the November election, but we have had a lot of outside groups that are sending out absentee ballot request forms. There's a lot of voter education going on. There are a lot of people who are going to cast their ballots by mail. Now, I do want to make a quick distinction. Here in Georgia, we don't have what is commonly referred to as mail-in voting. You actually have to ask for a ballot. That is how our Republican Secretary of State says that we have some safeguards in place versus states like California where they mail out a live ballot to registered voters. So here in Georgia, at least, I know our Republican Secretary of State and our elections boards that are both Republican and Democrat are really heavily pushing absentee by mail voting. And they say that fraud is very limited. They did, in Georgia, create a task force to look into potential fraud. And they said there were about 1,000 ballots that they're looking into from the June primary. But when you consider hundreds of thousands of votes that were cast, it's really a tiny percentage. And again, those are not confirmed. Those are just ballots that they're reviewing.
All right, and we just want to get the final thoughts of all of you. Obviously, this debate was supposed to be at the University of Notre Dame tonight, but it's taking place in Cleveland on the campus of the Cleveland Clinic. Tom, your final thoughts. What are you going to be looking for? Who do you see coming out ahead following the debate tonight?
Well, you know, the one thing I think I'm going to be looking for, which we have not talked as much about here, is how is Joe Biden going to deal with Donald Trump when Donald Trump does his Donald Trump thing and goes after Joe Biden like Joe Biden has not seen yet throughout any of those numerous Democratic primary campaign debates that we saw. Donald Trump is known for being tough. He throws everything, including the kitchen sink, at anybody who's standing at the opposing podium from it. We saw it when he was running for president in 2016 against those other Republicans. You know, we saw it against Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. Joe Biden has to make a calculated decision. How much does he engage the president in those kinds of tactics? How much of his time does he use? Because remember, this is all on the clock. How much time does he devote to fact-checking what the president says? And is he able to rapid-fire respond to the president in the ways that the president is able to level these attacks as he has done so quickly and so often? It's a completely different kind of strategy that Joe Biden is going to have to bring into this debate than any of the previous ones that he'd faced against traditional political opponents.
And Mike, you know, the president has said numerous times that just being president is debate prep in and of itself. There's been reporting that Rudy Giuliani and Chris Christie are playing Biden in the debate prep. What are your thoughts for tonight, Mike?
I think Tom is spot on. I would say that it's 4 years later, though. And I'm not sure that the president, saddled with this record, some good, some not so good, is going to be able to do what he did 4 years ago, and perhaps even what he's done from the White House press room podium on occasion. I think that the Biden people are already signaling that they're going to let a lot of this just kind of be Donald Trump noise, and they're going to focus on COVID. They're going to focus on the Affordable Care Act. They're going to focus, I think, too, on this tax issue. And again, here in the Midwest, those non-college educated, white, blue-collar voters just north of us in Wisconsin, across the big lake in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, I think that this tax return story, these revelations in the New York Times, open up a whole series of counterattacks that Joe Biden can launch into, aimed squarely at those white blue-collar voters who are the core of Donald Trump's support. And in those states, I mean, he carried Michigan by less than 11,000 votes. They don't have to pick off very many. He carried Wisconsin by just a few more votes than that. Again, they don't have to pick off very many of those people for Joe Biden to win those critical states. And the other thing that I'm looking for, as I said earlier, is for Joe Biden to get a thorough cross-examination by Chris Wallace. Let's see how he stands up, especially on issues where these two men have sharp differences on divisive wedge issues like systemic racism. Joe Biden has said repeatedly it's going to be one of the things he focuses on as president. It's one of the things that a Democratic House and Senate, if that were to be the case, would focus on. Donald Trump says it doesn't exist. There is no systemic racism. I think this is a debate well worth watching, folks.
And that's right, Claire. Like Mike said, this will be obviously must-see TV. It's the first matchup between the two. And, you know, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they're both in their late 70s. Joe Biden, if elected, would be the oldest person to hold the office of the presidency. But Claire, what are you looking for tonight?
I think you guys all have mentioned really great things, but one of the things, I'm going to bring up Dr. Lee again with Emory University here in Atlanta. One of the things he mentioned is we are in such a social media world that obviously people are going to be watching that 90 minutes, and I think the ratings are going to be probably pretty high. But it's what resonates the next day on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, wherever else these candidates may be. It's those little sort of moments that where they really land a good point or whatever the case may be with these two, we'll find out. But I think those things that people are still talking about on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and even into the weekend, those are the real moments I think we're going to be looking for.
Yeah, Claire, I mean, that's a great point. For those of voters who don't watch this every day like us, we'll see how much of this sticks with them. In the first debate, Claire Sims, Mike Flannery, and Tom Fitzgerald, three of the top political reporters from across the country. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in tonight's debate. Thank you.
EVE Online is a vast universe, alive with the unrelenting.
Yet tonight, this building serves another purpose, in support of our democracy, and it is a historic occasion for us and for our city. We are proud to support the Commission on Presidential Debates as their health security advisor. We at Cleveland Clinic and our 70,000 caregivers have been serving the health needs in Cleveland since 1921, nearly 100 years. Yet, our organization and our caregivers have never shone brighter than during this pandemic. The pandemic has brought out the best of our organization and our caregivers, of our city and our state. Through partnership and collaboration, we see how much we can accomplish when we work together. And we are particularly proud of our partnership with Case Western Reserve University. With that, I would like to introduce my colleague and friend, President of Case Western Reserve University, Barbara Snyder.
Thank you, Tom. Case Western Reserve is honored to co-host this presidential debate with our partners at Cleveland Clinic, and delighted to show you this spectacular space we created together. Research has long shown that team-based healthcare leads to better outcomes for patients. Yet nearly every academic institution continues to prepare students in separate buildings, literally in silos. Yet after spending years learning only with students from the same profession, doctors with doctors, nurses with nurses, and so on, they are suddenly expected to know how to work in teams once they get their diplomas. We knew there had to be a better way, and together we built it. When not filled with a stage and seats, this atrium gives hundreds of students a huge open space to study, talk, and simply be together. The entire building provides multiple spaces for them to come together, supported by an academic model that emphasizes opportunities to learn with and from one another. Add state-of-the-art technology, and we know our graduates will be uniquely prepared to excel in team-based care and ultimately to lead it. Along the way, Cleveland Clinic and Case Western Reserve also learned from one another. Among the most valuable lessons was that through collaboration, we achieve far more than either of us could achieve alone. Thank you, Tom, for being such a wonderful colleague and friend. Thank you to the Commission for giving both of our organizations the opportunity to be part of this historic event. It is a true privilege to contribute to our nation's democratic process. And thank you all for watching.
Thank you, Tom and Barbara, very much. Most valuable player, award for this evening goes to Toby Cosgrove. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. One housekeeping bit for the audience. As soon as this debate is over, if you will please remain seated, you will be shown which way to exit. And please stay where you are until that happens. I would like to now introduce Chris Wallace, the moderator of this evening's debate.
But I do think that there are going to be issues that Biden's just going to go right back at.
That should not be linked, and it's almost making an editorial comment in itself.
This is an ABC News special.
We will make America great again.
And we're in the battle for the soul of this nation.
With so much on the line, the wait is over. Donald Trump.
At no time before have voters faced a clearer choice between two parties.
Joe Biden.
Who we are as a nation, what we stand for, and most importantly, who we want to be. That's all on the ballot.
Face to face. The main event starts right now. The first presidential debate, live from Case Western Reserve University and Cleveland Clinic in Ohio and New York City. Now reporting, Chief Anchor George Stephanopoulos.
Good evening. Welcome back to our special coverage of this first presidential debate. Just moments away now, Donald Trump and Joe Biden will take the stage for 90 minutes, 6 topics on the table. The big question, will the candidates do anything tonight to change the course of this race? President Trump is behind right now, has been for months, and our statistics guru Nate Silver at 538 calculates that Joe Biden is coming into this debate season with a 78% chance of winning the White House. But there are 3 debates, 5 weeks to go, and President Trump has a history of shaking things up. Our chief White House correspondent John Karl is on the scene in Cleveland.
George, Donald Trump goes into this debate with his back against the wall. By every publicly available measure, he is losing this race, trailing in the national polls, no consistent lead in any of the top dozen most competitive battleground states. He needs to change the dynamic of this race, and tonight is the best chance for him to do it. He's been here before. 4 years ago, his campaign was collapsing.
The Hemet CDJR Labor Day Sale-a-thon is going on now. Lease a new
Good evening from the Health Education campus of Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Clinic. I'm Chris Wallace of Fox News, and I welcome you to the first of the 2020 presidential debates between President Donald J. Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. The commission has designed the format, 6 roughly 15-minute segments with 2-minute answers from each candidate to the first question, then open discussion for the rest of each segment. Both campaigns have agreed to these rules. For the record, I decided the topics and the questions in each topic. I can assure you, none of the questions has been shared with the commission or the 2 candidates. This debate is being conducted under health and safety protocols designed by the Cleveland Clinic, which is serving as the health security advisor to the commission for all 4 debates. As a precaution, both campaigns have agreed the candidates will not shake hands at the beginning of tonight's debate. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, no boos or other interruptions, so we, and more importantly you, can focus on what the candidates have to say. No noise except right now, as we welcome the Republican nominee, President Trump, and the Democratic nominee, Vice President Biden.
How you doing, man? How are you? I'm well.
Gentlemen, a lot of people have been waiting for this night, so let's get going. Our first subject is the Supreme Court. President Trump, you nominated Amy Coney Barrett over the weekend to succeed the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court. You say the Constitution is clear about your obligation and the Senate's to consider a nominee to the court. Vice President Biden, you say that this is an effort by the president and Republicans to jam through an appointment and what you call an abuse of power. My first question to both of you tonight, why are you right in the argument you make and your opponent wrong, and where do you think a Justice Barrett would take the court? President Trump, in this first segment, you go first, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris. I will tell you very simply, we won the election. Elections have consequences. We have the Senate, we have the White House, and we have a phenomenal nominee, respected by all, top academic, good in every way, In fact, some of her biggest endorsers are very liberal people. from Notre Dame and other places. So I think she's going to be fantastic. We have plenty of time, even if we did it after the election itself. I have a lot of time after the election, as you know. So I think that she will be outstanding. She's going to be as good as anybody that has served on that court. We really feel that. We have a professor at Notre Dame, highly respected by all, said she's the single greatest student he's ever had. He's been a professor for a long time at a great school. And we won the election, and therefore we have the right to choose her. And very few people knowingly would say otherwise. And by the way, the Democrats, they wouldn't even think about not doing it. If they had, the only difference is they'd try and do it faster. There's no way they would give it up. They had Merrick Garland, but the problem is they didn't have the election, so they were stopped. And probably that would happen in reverse also. Definitely would happen in reverse. So we won the election, and we have the right to do it, Chris.
President Trump, thank you. Same question to you, Vice President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this, and looking forward to this, Mr. President.
Thank you, Joe.
The American people have a right to have a say in who the Supreme Court nominee is. And that say occurs when they vote for United States senators and when they vote for the President of the United States. They're not going to get that chance now because we're in the middle of an election already. The election has already started. Tens of thousands of people have already voted. And so the thing that should happen is we should wait. We should wait and see what the outcome of this election is, because that's the only way the American people get to express their view is by who they elect as president and who they elect as vice president. Now, what's at stake here is the president's made it clear he wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. He's been running on that, he ran on that, and he's been governing on that. He's in the Supreme Court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which will strip 20 million people from having insurance, health insurance now, if it goes into court. And the justice, and I have nothing, I'm not opposed to the justice, she seems like a very fine person. But she's written before she went on the bench, which is her right, that she thinks that the Affordable Care Act is not constitutional. The other thing that's on the court, and if it's struck down, what happens? Women's rights are fundamentally changed. Once again, a woman could be pay more money because she has a pre-existing condition of pregnancy. They were able to charge a woman more for the same exact procedure a man gets. And that ended when we, in fact, passed the Affordable Care Act. And there's 100 million people who have pre-existing conditions, and they'll be taken away as well. Those pre-existing conditions, the insurance companies are going to love this. And so it's just not appropriate to do this before this election. If he wins the election and the Senate is Democrat or Republican, then he goes forward. If not, we should wait until February.
All right. There aren't 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. As far as the say is concerned, the people already had their say. Okay, Justice Ginsburg said very powerfully, very strongly, at some point, 10 years ago or so, she said a president and the Senate is elected for a period of time, but a president's elected for 4 years. We're not elected for 3 years. I'm not elected for 3 years. So we have the Senate, we have a president.
He's elected to the next
during
election.
that period of time, we have an opening. I'm not elected for 3 years. I'm elected for 4 years. And the 100 million people, Joe, the 100 million people is totally wrong. I don't know where you got that number. The bigger problem that you have is that you're going to extinguish 180 million people with their private health care that they're very happy with.
That's simply not true.
Well, you're certainly going to socialist. You're going to socialist medicine.
We're now into, gentlemen, we're now into open discussion.
Open discussion.
Open discussion. Yes, I agree. Go ahead, Vice President.
Number one, he knows that what I proposed. What I proposed is that we expand Obamacare and we increase it. We do not wipe any, and one of the big debates we had with 23 of my colleagues trying to win the nomination that I won were saying that Biden wanted to allow people to have private insurance still. They can. They do. They will under my proposal.
It's not what you've said,
but
and it's not what your party has said.
That is simply
your party
a lie.
doesn't say it. Your party wants to go socialist medicine.
My party is
and
me.
socialist
right
healthcare.
now, I am
and
the
they're going to dominate
party.
you, Joe. You know that.
I am the Democratic Party right now. The platform of the Democratic Party is what I, in fact, approved of. What I approved of. Now, here's the deal. The deal is that it's going to wipe out pre-existing conditions. And by the way, the 200,000 people that have died on his watch, how many of those have survived? Well, there's 7 million people that contracted COVID. What does it mean for them going forward if you strike down the Affordable Care Act?
Joe, you've had 308,000 military people dying because you couldn't provide them proper health care in the military. So don't tell me about this.
I'm happy to talk about this.
And if you were here,
Look,
it wouldn't be 200, it would be 2 million people because you were very late on the draw. You didn't want me to ban China, which was heavily infected. You didn't want me to ban
All right, gentlemen,
Europe, which was heavily
Mr. President,
infected. You would have been much later, Joe.
Mr. President,
much later.
Mr. President.
You're talking about 2 million people.
Mr. President, as a moderator, we are going to talk about COVID in the next segment, but go ahead.
Let me finish. The point is that the president also is opposed to Roe v. Wade. That's on the ballot as well in the court. And so that's also at stake right now. And so the election is already
You don't know it's
begun.
on the ballot. Why is it on the ballot?
Because
Why is it on the ballot? It's not on the ballot.
It's on the ballot in the court.
I don't think so.
In the court. Well,
there's nothing happening there.
Donald, would you
and
just
you don't
be quiet
know
for a
her view on Roe v. Wade. You
I
don't know her view.
Well, all right. Let's talk. We got a lot to unpack here, gentlemen. We got a lot of time. So on health care, and then we'll come back to Roe v. Wade.
All right.
Mr. President, the Supreme Court will hear a case a week after the election in which the Trump administration, along with 18 state attorneys general, are seeking to overturn Obamacare, to end Obamacare. You have spent the last...
Because they want to give good health care.
If I may ask my question, sir.
Good health care.
Over the last 4 years, you have promised to repeal and replace Obamacare, but you have never in these 4 years come up with a plan, a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare.
Of course I have.
Well,
I got rid of the individual mandate.
I'm going to give you an opportunity.
I got rid of the individual mandate, which was a big chunk of Obamacare. That is absolutely a big thing. That was the worst part of Obamacare.
Sir,
Chris, that was the worst part of Obamacare.
Let me ask my question.
Well, I'll ask Joe. The individual mandate was the most unpopular aspect of Obamacare. I got rid of it.
I'd like
and we will protect people with
President, I'm the moderator of this
conditions.
debate, and I would like you to let me ask my question, and then you can answer your question. Go ahead. You, in the course of these 4 years, have never come up with a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare. And just this last Thursday, you signed a largely symbolic executive order to protect people with pre-existing conditions 5 days before this debate. So my question, sir, is what is the Trump health care plan?
Fine. Well, first of all, I guess I'm debating you, not him, but that's okay. I'm not surprised. Let me just tell you something, that there's nothing symbolic. I'm cutting drug prices. I'm going with favored nations, which no president has the courage to do because you're going against big pharma. Drug prices will be coming down 80 or 90%. You could have done it during your 47-year period in government, but you didn't do it. Nobody's done it. So we're cutting health care. All of the things that we've done, insulin. I give you an example, insulin. It was destroying families, destroying people. The cost, I'm getting it for so cheap. It's like water, you want to know the truth. So cheap. Take a look at all of the drugs what we're doing, prescription drug prices. We're going to allow our governors now to go to other countries to buy drugs because they pay just a tiny fraction.
As I say, this is open discussion.
No,
let me
but
ask
this
you
is
about,
big.
This
is big stuff.
Sir, you'll be happy. I'm about to pick up on one of your points to ask the Vice President, which is he points out that you would like to add a public option to Obamacare. And the argument that he makes and other Republicans make is that that is going to end private insurance.
It is not.
And well, if I can ask you the question, it will
end. Not what your party says, by the way.
It will end private insurance and create a government takeover of health care.
It does not. It's only for those people who are so poor they qualify for Medicaid. They can get that free in most states, except governors who want to deny people who are poor Medicaid. Anyone who qualifies for Medicare Medicaid would automatically be enrolled in the public option. The vast majority of the American people would still not be in that option, number one.
Joe, you agreed with Bernie Sanders, who's far left, on the manifesto, we call it, and that gives you socialized medicine.
Look, hey,
Are you saying
I'm not going to
agree?
listen to him. The fact of the matter is, I beat Bernie Sanders.
Not by much.
I beat him a whole hell of a lot. I'm here standing facing you, old buddy.
Pocahontas would have left 2 days early. You would have lost every primary.
All he knows how to do is
Super Tuesday. You got very lucky.
Here's the deal. I got very lucky. I'm going to get very lucky tonight as well. And tonight I'm going to
With
make
what?
sure, because
With what?
here's the deal. Here's the deal. The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just
agreed.
want to
Hey,
make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
I want to make
Mr.
sure.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. He has,
You'd be
you know,
surprised.
you pick
You'd be surprised.
the
Go ahead,
wrong
Joe.
guy,
Talk,
the wrong
Joe,
night at
go.
the wrong time.
Listen, you agreed with
Here's the
Bernie
deal.
Sanders to the
The
manifesto.
whole idea.
Now
let
you're
him-
disavowing it.
There is no manifesto, number
Please
one.
let him speak, Mr.
Number
President.
two.
You just lost the left.
Number two.
You just lost the left. You agreed with Bernie Sanders on a plan
folks,
that's absolutely
folks,
agreed
do you
to,
have
and
any
under that
idea
plan,
what
you
this
have
clown's
socialized,
doing?
They call it
Mr.
Do you have any
medicare, socialized medicine.
Mr.
Well, I
President.
tell you what, he is not for any help for people needing health care. Because because he, in fact, already has cost 10 million people their health care that they had from their employers because of his recession. Number one. Number two, there are 20 million people getting health care through Obamacare now that he wants to take it away. He won't ever look you in the eye and say that's what he wants to do. Take it away.
No, I want to give them
Number
better
three.
health care at a much lower price
But-
because
and by the way,
Obamacare
he doesn't
is
know
no
how.
good.
He doesn't know how
I've
to do
already
that.
fixed it.
He has never
I've
offered
already
a plan.
fixed it to an extent.
He has never
Obamacare,
done a
as
single
you might
thing.
know, but probably don't. Obamacare
Gentlemen, you realize
is no
if you're
good,
both
Joe.
speaking at the
It's no
same
good,
time,
and it's too expensive.
let the president go ahead, sir.
Obamacare is no good. We made it better, and I had a choice to make very early on. We took away the individual mandate. We guarantee pre-existing conditions, but took away the individual mandate. Listen, this is the way it is. And that destroyed, that they shouldn't even call it Obamacare. Then I had a choice to make. Do I let my people run it really well or badly? If I run it badly, they'll probably blame him, but they'll blame me. But more importantly, I want to help people, okay? I said, you got to run it so well.
That's what he's
and I
known for.
just had a meeting with them. They said, the problem is no matter how well you run Obamacare, it's a disaster. It's too expensive.
Okay.
Premiums are too high, and it doesn't work. So we do want to get rid of it. Chris, we want to get rid of it.
I understand it, sir, but I have to give you roughly equal time.
Good.
Please let the vice president talk.
Good.
He has no plan for health care. Of
course we do.
Please.
He sends out wishful thinking. He has executive orders that have no power. He hasn't lowered drug costs for anybody. He's been promising a health care plan since he got elected. He has none, like almost everything else he talks about. He does not have a plan. He doesn't have a plan. And the fact is, this man doesn't know what he's talking about.
All right.
He's
I have one final question for you,
Sure.
Mr. Vice President. If Senate Republicans, we were talking originally about the Supreme Court here, if Senate Republicans go ahead and confirm Justice Barrett, there has been talk about ending the filibuster or even packing the court, adding to the 9 justices there. You call this a distraction by the president, but in fact, it wasn't brought up by the president. It was brought up by some of your Democratic colleagues in the Congress. So my question to you is, you have refused in the past to talk about it. Are you willing to tell the American people tonight whether or not you will support either ending the filibuster or packing the court?
Whatever position I take on that, that'll become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak. You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how strongly you feel. Vote now.
Are you going to pack the
Make
court?
sure you, in fact, let people know
He doesn't want to
you're a
answer the
senator.
question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the
You wanna
question
put a lot
is
of
the
new
question
Supreme Court
is
justices,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
right.
Gentlemen, I think we've ended this.
He's going to pack the court.
We have
not going to give a list.
We have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? Keep yapping, man.
The people understand, Joe.
They sure
47 years you've done nothing. They understand.
All right. The second subject is COVID-19, which is an awfully serious subject, so let's try to be serious about it. We have had more than 7 million cases of coronavirus in the United States, and more than 200,000 people have died. Even after we produce a vaccine, experts say that it could be months or even years before we come back to anything approaching normal. My question for both of you is, based on what you have said and done so far and what you have said you would do starting in 2021, why should the American people trust you more than your opponent to deal with this public health crisis going forward. In this case, the question goes to you first, sir. 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Good luck. 200,000 dead. As you said, over 7 million infected in the United States. We, in fact, have 4% of the world's population, 20% of the deaths. 40,000 people a day are contracting COVID. In addition to that, about between 750 and 1,000 people a day are dying. When he was presented with that number, he said, it is what it is. Well, it is what it is because you are who you are. That's why it is. The president has no plan. He hasn't laid out anything. He knew all the way back in February how serious this crisis was. He knew it was a deadly disease. What did he do? He's on tape as acknowledging he knew it. He said he didn't tell us or give people a warning of it because he didn't want to panic the American people. You don't panic. He panicked. In addition to that, what did he do? He went in and we were insisting that the Chinese, the people we had on the ground in China should be able to go to Wuhan and determine for themselves how dangerous this was. He did not even ask Xi to do that. He told us what a great job Xi was doing. He said we owe him a debt of gratitude for being so transparent with us. And what did he do then? He then did nothing. He waited and waited and waited. He still doesn't have a plan. I laid out back in March exactly what we should be doing. And I laid out again in July what we should be doing. We should be providing all the protective gear possible. We should be providing the money the House has passed in order to be able to go out and get people the help they need to keep their businesses open schools. It costs a lot of money. You should get out of your bunker and get out of the sand trap and get in your golf course and go in the Oval Office and bring together the Democrats and Republicans and fund what needs to be done now to save lives.
So if we would have listened to you.
You have 2 minutes, sir.
If we would have listened to you, the country would have been left wide open. Millions of people would have died, not 200,000, and one person is too much. It's China's fault. It should have never happened. They stopped it from going in, but it was China's fault. And by the way, when you talk about numbers, you don't know how many people died in China. You don't know how many people died in Russia. You don't know how many people died in India. They don't exactly give you a straight count, just so you understand. But if you look at what we've done, I closed it, and you said he's xenophobic. He's a racist, and he's xenophobic because you didn't think I should have closed our country.
Wait a minute. It says 2 minutes.
You didn't think we should have closed our country because you thought it was terrible. You wouldn't have closed it for another 2 months. By my doing it early, in fact, Dr. Fauci said, President Trump saved thousands of lives. Many of your Democrat governors said, President Trump did a phenomenal job. We worked with the governor. Oh, really? Go take a look. The governors said I did a phenomenal job. Most of them said that. In fact, people that would not be necessarily on my side said that. President Trump did a phenomenal job. We did. We got the gowns. We got the masks. We made the ventilators. You wouldn't have made ventilators. And now we're weeks away from a vaccine. We're doing therapeutics already. Fewer people are dying when they get sick. Far fewer people are dying. We've done a great job. The only thing I haven't done a good job, and that's because of the fake news. No matter what you say to them, they give you bad press on it. It's just fake news. They give you good press. They give me bad press because that's the way it is, unfortunately. But let me just tell you something. I don't care. I've gotten used to it. But I'll tell you, Joe, you could never have done the job that we did. You don't have it in your blood. You could have never done that job.
I know how to do the job. I know how to get the job
Well, you didn't do very well in swine flu. H1N1, you were a disaster. Your own chief of staff said you were a disaster.
14,000 people died, not 200,000. There was no economic recession.
Sir, you made a
there was no recession.
You made a point. Let him answer.
And there was we didn't shut down the economy. This is his economy he shut down. The reason it's shut down is because, look, you folks at home, how many of you got up this morning and had an empty chair at the kitchen table because someone died of COVID? How many of you were in a situation where you lost your mom or dad and you couldn't even speak to them? You had a nurse holding a phone up so you could, in fact, say goodbye.
You would have lost far more people. Far more people.
And
you would have been.
And by the way, his own CDC director says we could lose as many as another 200,000 people between now and the end of the year. And he held up. He said, if we just wear a mask, we can save half those numbers. Just a mask. And by the way, in terms of the whole notion of a vaccine, We're for a vaccine, but I don't trust him at all, nor do you. I know you don't. What we trust is a scientist.
You don't
we
trust
Dr.
Johnson
Fauci.
& Johnson, Pfizer?
And
okay,
by the way,
gentlemen, let me move on to questions about the future, because you both have touched on two of the questions I'm going to ask. Focusing on the future first, President Trump, you have repeatedly either contradicted or been at odds with some of your government's own top scientists. The week before last, the head of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Redfield, said it would be summer before the vaccine would become generally available to the public. You said that he was confused and mistaken. Those were your two words.
Yeah.
But Dr. Slaoui, the head of your Operation Warp Speed, has said exactly the same thing. Are they both wrong?
Well, I've spoken to the companies, and we can have it a lot sooner. It's a very political thing because people like this would rather make it political than save lives.
God.
It is a very political thing. I've spoken to Pfizer. I've spoken to all of the people that you have to speak to. We have great Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and others. They can go faster than that by a lot. Become very political because the left, or I don't know if I call them left, I don't know what I call them.
So you're suggesting that the head of your Operation Warp Speed, Dr. Slaoui?
I disagree with him. Yeah, no, I disagree with both of them. And he didn't say that. He said it could be there, but it could also be much sooner. I had him in my office 2 days ago.
He talked about the summer, sir, before it's generally available, just like
he
Dr.
said it's
Redfield.
a possibility that we'll have the answer before November 1st. It could also be
talking
after
about when it's
that.
generally available, not when it will
we're
be.
going to deliver it right away. We have the military all set up. Logistically, they're all set up. We have our military that delivers soldiers, and they can do 200,000 a day. They're going to be
This
delivering
is the
vaccine.
same man
It's
who
all
told
set
you
up.
by Easter this would be gone away. By the warm weather, it'd be gone. Miraculous, like a miracle. And by the way, maybe you could inject some bleach in your arm, and that would take care of it. This is the same man.
That was said sarcastically, and you know that. That was said sarcastically.
And so here's the deal. This man is talking about a vaccine. Every serious company is talking about maybe having a vaccine done by the end of the year. But the distribution of that vaccine will not occur until sometime beginning or the middle of next year to get it out, if we get the vaccine. And pray God we will. Pray God we will.
Mr. Vice President, I want to pick up, though.
You'll have
on
the
that.
vaccine sooner
I want to
than
pick
that.
up on this question, though. You say the public can trust the scientists, but they can't trust President Trump. In fact, you said that again tonight. Your running mate, Senator Harris, goes further, saying the public health experts, quote, will be muzzled, will be suppressed. Given the fact that polls already show that people are concerned about the vaccine and are reluctant to take it, are you and your running mate, Senator Harris, contributing to that fear?
No more than the question you just asked him. You pointed out. He puts pressure and disagrees with his own scientists.
But you're saying
Everybody
you can't,
knows.
or Senator
And
Harris is saying
no,
you can't trust the scientists.
No, you can trust the scientists. She didn't say that. You can't trust
She said the public health
Did say
experts,
that.
quote, will be muzzled, will be suppressed.
Well, that's what he's going to try to do. But there's millions of scientists, there's thousands of scientists out there, like here at this great hospital, that don't work for him. Their job doesn't depend on him. That's not, they're the people, and by the way.
I spoke to the scientists that are in charge.
By the way.
They will have the vaccine very soon.
Let him finish.
Do you believe for a moment what he's telling you in light of all the lies he's told you about the whole issue relating to COVID? He still hasn't even acknowledged that he knew this was happening, knew how dangerous it was going to be back in February, and he didn't even tell you. He's on record as saying it. He panicked or he just looked at the stock market, one of the two, because guess what? A lot of people died, and a lot more are going to die unless he gets a lot smarter, a lot quicker.
So-
Mr. President?
Did you use the word smart? So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe. 47 years, you've done nothing.
Well, let's have this debate.
And if
We'll
you
see
would have
who's
had, let me just tell you something, Joe.
No,
if you would have had the charge of what I was put through, I had to close the greatest economy in the history of our country. And by the way, now it's being built again.
See,
and it's
We're going to
going
get
up
to the
fast.
economy in the next segment, sir.
Okay.
It's going up fast. I look
Okay.
forward to talking
When
about
it comes to how the virus has been handled so far, the two of you have taken very different approaches, and this is going to affect how the virus is handled going forward by whichever of you ends up becoming the next president. I want to quickly go through several of those. Reopenings. Vice President Biden, you have been much more reluctant than President Trump about reopening the economy and schools. Why, sir?
Because he doesn't have a plan. If I were running, I know what the plan is. You've got to provide these businesses the ability to have the money to be able to reopen with the PPE as well as with the sanitation they need. You have to provide
Tell that
them
to Nancy
plastic.
Pelosi.
Well, he's just shush for a minute.
Tell it to Nancy Pelosi and Schumer.
By the way,
Chuck.
Nancy Pelosi and Schumer, they have a plan. He won't even meet with them. The Republicans won't meet with the Senate. And he sits on his golf course. And I mean, literally, think about it.
You probably play more than I do, Joe.
What about this question of reopenings and the fact?
Well, he wants to shut down this country, and I want to keep it open. And we did a great thing by shutting it down. Wait a minute, Joe. Let me shut you down for a second, Joe, just for 1 second. He wants to shut down the country. We just went through it. We had to because we didn't know anything about the disease. Now we found that elderly people with heart problems and diabetes and different problems are very, very vulnerable. We learned a lot. Young children aren't. Even younger people aren't. We've learned a lot. But he wants to shut it down. More people will be hurt by continuing. If you look at Pennsylvania, if you look at certain states that have been shut down, they have Democrat governors all. One of the reasons they're shut down is because they want to keep it shut down until after the election on November 3rd.
I want to move on to another
because
subject.
it's a political
I've got to
but those states are not doing well that are shut down right now.
Respond to that.
President Trump, you have begun to increasingly question the effectiveness of masks as a disease preventer. And in fact, recently you have cited the issue of waiters touching their masks and touching plates. Are you questioning
No, I think
the
masks
efficacy
are okay.
of
You have
masks?
to understand, if you look, I mean, I have a mask right here. I put a mask on, when I think I need it. Tonight, as an example, everybody's had a test, and you've had social distancing and all of the things that you have to. But I wear masks when needed. When needed, I wear masks.
Okay, let me ask.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen. I will say this.
Vice President Biden, go ahead, sir.
Look, the way to open businesses is give them the wherewithal to be able to open. We provided money. The Congress.
But I was asking you, sir, about masks.
Well, masks make a big difference. His own head of the CDC said if we just wore masks between now, everybody wore masks in social distance between now and January, we'd probably save up to 100,000 lives. It matters.
And they've also said the opposite. They've also said
no serious person said the opposite.
Well, look at Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci said the opposite.
He did not say the opposite.
We got a little bit more than a minute left in this
masks
segment.
Masks are not good. Then he changed his mind. He said masks good. I'm okay with masks.
I want to ask you both about one last subject because your different approaches has even affected the way that you have campaigned. President Trump, you're holding large rallies with crowds packed together, thousands of people. Outside, yes, sir, agreed. Vice President Biden, you are holding much smaller events with...
Because nobody will show up.
People with...
Well, it's true. Nobody shows up to his rallies.
All right. In any case, why you holding the big rallies? Why you not? You go first, sir.
Because people want to hear what I have to say. I mean,
but are you not worried about it spreading
as a
disease?
president, and I'll have 35,000 people show up at airports. We use airports.
Are you not worried about the
disease issues? We have a lot of people.
Sir?
Well, so far, we have had no problem whatsoever. It's outside. That's a big difference, according to the experts. And we do them outside. We have tremendous crowds, as you see. I mean, and literally on 24 hours' notice. And Joe does the circles and has 3 people someplace.
Okay. By the way, did you see one of the last big rallies he had? And a reporter came up to him to ask him a question. He said, no, stand back. Put on your mask. Put on a mask. Have you been tested? I'm way far away from those other people. That's what he said. I can't. I'm going to be okay. He's not worried about you. He's not worried about the people out there breathing in one another.
We've had no negative effect.
No negative effect.
We've had no negative effect. And we've had 35,000, 40,000 people at these rallies.
Just quickly finish up because I want to move on to our next.
Yes, I would. He's been totally irresponsible the way in which he has handled the social distancing and people wearing masks, basically encouraged them not to.
All right.
He's a fool on this.
If you could get the crowds, you would have done the same thing. But you can't. Nobody cares.
Gentlemen, can we move on to the
cares.
Gentlemen, can we move on to the economy?
Yes.
The economy is, I think it's fair to say, recovering faster than expected from the shutdown.
Much faster.
In the second quarter, the unemployment rate fell to 8.4% last month. The Federal Reserve says the hit to growth, which is going to be there, is not going to be nearly as big as they had expected. President Trump, you say we are in a V-shaped recovery. Vice President Biden, you say it's more of a K-shape. What difference does that mean to the American people in terms of the economy? President Trump, in this segment, you go first.
So we built the greatest economy in history. We closed it down because of the China plague. When the plague came in, we closed it down, which was very hard psychologically to do. He didn't think we should close it down, and he was wrong. And again, 2 million people would be dead now instead of still 204,000 people is too much. One person is too much. Should have never happened from China. But what happened is we closed it down, and now we're reopening, and we're doing record business. We had 10.4 million people in a 4-month period that we've put back into the workforce. That's a record the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. And he wants to close down he will shut it down again. He will destroy this country. You know, a lot of people, between drugs and alcohol and depression, when you start shutting it down, you take a look at what's happening in some of your Democrat-run states where they have these tough shutdowns. And I'm telling you, it's because they don't want to open it. One of them came out last week. You saw that. Oh, we're going to open up on November 9th. Why November 9th? Because it's after the election. They think they're hurting us by keeping them closed. They're hurting people. People know what to do. They can social distance. They can wash their hands. They can wear masks. They can do whatever they want. But they got to open these states up. When you look at North Carolina, when you look, and these governors are under siege, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a couple of others, you got to open these states up. It's not fair. You're talking about almost it's like being in prison. And you look at what's going on with divorce, look at what's going on with alcoholism and drugs. It's a very, very sad thing. And he'll close down the whole country. This guy will close down the whole country and destroy our country. Our country is coming back incredibly well, setting records as it does it. We don't need somebody to come in and say, let's shut it down.
All right. Your 2 minutes, sir. We're now moved to you. As I said, posing the question, the president says it's a V-shaped recovery. You say it's a K-shaped recovery. What's the difference?
The difference is millionaires and billionaires like him in the middle of the COVID crisis have done very well. Billionaires have made another $300 billion because of his profligate tax proposal, and he only focused on the market. But you folks at home, you folks living in Scranton and Claymont and all the small towns and working class towns in America, how well are you doing? This guy paid a total of $750 in taxes.
Sir, wait, no, sir, it's his yeah, I understand. You've agreed to the 2 minutes, so please let him have it.
Do I get my time back? The fact is that he has, in fact, worked on this in a way that he's going to be the first president of the United States to leave office having fewer jobs in his administration than when he became president. Fewer jobs than when he became president. First one in American history. Secondly, the people who have lost their jobs are those people who have been on the front lines, those people who have been saving our lives, those people who have been out there dying, people who've been putting themselves in the way to make sure that we could all try to make it. And the idea that he is insisting that we go forward and open when you have almost half the states in America with a significant increase in COVID deaths and COVID cases in the United States of America. And he wants to open it up more. Why does he want to open it up? Why doesn't he take care of the American? You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis. And he has no intention of doing anything about making it better for you all at home in terms of your health and your safety. Schools, why aren't schools open? Because it costs a lot of money to open them safely. You know, they were going to give, his administration was going to give the teachers and school students masks. And then they decided, no, couldn't do that because it's not a national emergency. Not a national emergency. They've done nothing to help small businesses. Nothing. They're closing. 1 in 6 is now gone. He ought to get on the job and take care of the needs of the American people so we can open safely.
All right. Your time is up, sir. Well, we are going to get to...
I have to respond to that.
Well, you both had 2 minutes, sir.
Excuse me, he made a statement.
So did you.
People want their schools, people want their schools open. They don't want to be shut down. They don't want their state shut down. They want their restaurants. I look at New York. It's so sad what's happening in New York. It's almost like a ghost town, and I'm not sure it can ever recover what they've done in New York. People want their places open. They want to get back to their lives. They'll
want
be
to
careful,
safe.
but they want their schools open. I'm the one that brought back football. By the way, I brought back Big Ten football. It was me, and I'm very happy to do it. And
All right,
people of Ohio are very proud of me. And you know how I found out? When he took
Gentlemen,
a phony
we're going to
ad.
get to your economic plans going forward in a moment. But first, Mr. President, as you well know, there's a new report that in 2016, the year you were elected president, and 2017, your first year as president, that you paid $750 a year in federal income tax each of those years. I know that you pay a lot of other taxes, but I'm asking you the specific question. Is it true that you paid $750 in federal income taxes each of those 2 years?
I paid millions of dollars in taxes, millions of dollars of income tax. And let me just tell you, there was a story in one of the papers.
Show us your tax
I paid
returns.
$38 million 1 year. I paid $27 million
Show us your tax
1 year.
returns.
I went. You'll see it as soon as it's finished. You'll see it. You know, if you want to go to the Board of Elections. There's a 118-page or so report that says everything I have, every bank I have, I'm totally under-leveraged because the assets are extremely good, and we have a very, I built
Sir,
a great
I'm asking
company.
you a specific question, which
But
is...
let me tell you...
I understand all of that.
Release your
I
tax
understand
return.
all of that.
But let me-
No, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
I'm asking you a question. Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars?
Millions of dollars.
So
yes.
not 750?
Millions of dollars, and you'll get to see it. And you'll get to see it. But let me just tell you, Chris, let me just tell you something, that it was the tax laws. I don't want to pay tax. Before I came here, I was a private developer. I was a private business people. Like every other private person, unless they're stupid, they go through the laws, and that's what it is. He passed a tax bill that gave us all these privileges for depreciation and for tax credits. We build a building and we get tax credits, like the hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. You get a massive, which, by the way, was given to me by the Obama administration, if you can believe that. Now, the man got fired right after that happened. But
Vice President Biden, you want to respond?
Yeah, I do want to respond. Look, the tax code that made him, put him in a position that he pays less tax than a school teacher on the money a school teacher makes, is because of him he says he's smart because he can take advantage of the tax code. And he does take advantage of the tax code. That's why I'm going to eliminate the Trump tax cuts. And I'm going to eliminate those tax cuts and make sure that we invest in the people who, in fact, need the help. People out there need help.
But why didn't you do it over the last 25 years?
Because you weren't president. Because you weren't president screwing things up.
You were a senator. And
You're
by
the
the way,
worst
you were a
president
vice-
America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me just tell you, Joe. I've done more in 47 months. I've done more than you've done in 47 years, Joe. We've done things that you never even thought of doing, including fixing the broken military that you gave me, including taking care of your vets.
Mr. President, we're talking about the economy. I'd like to ask you about your plans going forward, because, Mr. Vice President, your economic plan, if you were to be elected president, focuses a lot on big government, big taxes, big spending. I want to focus first on the taxes. You propose more than $4 trillion over a decade in new taxes on individuals making more than $400,000 a year and on corporations. President Trump says that that kind of an increase in taxes is going to hurt the economy as it's just coming out of a recession.
Well, just take a look at what the analysis done by Wall Street firms. Points out that my economic plan would create 7 million more jobs than his in 4 years, number one. And number two, it would create an additional $1 trillion in economic growth, because it would be about buying American. That we're going to make, this federal government spends $600 billion a year on everything from ships to steel to buildings and the like. And under my proposal, we're going to make sure that every penny of that has to be made by a company.
But respectfully, sir, I'm talking about taxes, not spending.
By the way, I'm going to eliminate a significant number of the tax. I'm going to make the The corporate tax, 28%. It shouldn't be 21%. You have 91 companies, in the Fortune 500, who don't pay a single penny in tax, making billions of dollars.
Why didn't you do it before when you were vice president with Obama?
Because you, in fact, passed that. That was
right.
your tax proposal.
I got it done. And you know what happened?
Yeah, you got it done.
Our economy boomed like it's never boomed.
The economy is busted.
Mr. President, Mr. President, let me pick up on that. You would continue your free market approach, lower taxes, more deregulation, correct?
Not lower taxes for the American people.
But let me. Excuse me. But in Obama's, you talk about the economy booming. It turns out that in Obama's final 3 years as president, more jobs were created, 1.5 million more jobs than in the first 3 years of your presidency.
They had the slowest recovery economic recovery since 1929. It was the slowest recovery. Also, they took over something that was down here. All you had to do is turn on the lights and you pick up a lot. But they had the slowest economic recovery since 1929. Let me tell you about the stock market. When the stock market goes up, that means jobs. It also means 401ks. If you got in, if you ever became president with your ideas, you want to terminate my taxes, I'll tell you what, you'll lose half of the companies that have poured in here will leave, and plenty of companies that are already here, they'll leave for other places. They will leave, and you will have a depression, the likes of which you've never seen.
Look, we inherited the worst recession short of a depression in American history. I was asked to bring it back. We were able to have an economic recovery that created the jobs you're talking about. We handed him a booming economy. He blew it.
It wasn't
booming.
He blew it. It wasn't booming. It was the weakest recovery since 1929.
Is it fair to say he blew it when fact, when there was record low unemployment before COVID?
Yeah, but because what he did, even before COVID, manufacturing went in the hole. Manufacturing went in the hole.
Excuse me, Chris. Wait.
Number two.
Chris.
Number three.
They said it would take. No, you're on number two.
No.
Chris. They said it would take a miracle to bring back manufacturing. I brought back 700,000 jobs. They brought back nothing. They gave up on manufacturing. Part of my standard fare.
I'm the guy that brought back the automobile industry.
All right, let him.
We brought back. I was asked to bring back Chrysler and General Motors. We brought them back right here in the state of Ohio and Michigan. He blew it. They're gone. He blew it. And in fact, they're going.
Ohio had the best year it's ever had last year. Michigan had the best year they've ever had.
That is not
Many
true.
car companies came in from Germany, from Japan, went to Michigan, went to Ohio.
They're not having.
And they didn't come in with you.
Mr. Vice President, go ahead.
And so you take a look at what he's actually done. He's done very little. His trade deals are the same way. He talks about these great trade deals. You know, he talks about the art of the deal. China's perfected the art of the steal. We have a higher deficit with China now than we did before. We have the highest trade deficit with Mexico.
China ate your lunch, down 18%. China ate your lunch, Joe, and no wonder your son goes in and he takes out billions of dollars. Takes out billions of dollars to manage. He makes millions of dollars. And also, while we're at it, why is it, just out of curiosity, the mayor of Moscow's wife gave your son $3.5 million. What did he do to deserve it? What did he do with Burisma to deserve $183,000?
You've asked your question, let him answer.
None of that is true.
Oh, really? He didn't get $3.5 million?
Mr. President,
Mr.
President, please.
Totally discredited. Totally discredited. And by the way,
well, wait, he didn't get $3.5 million, Joe?
Mr. Vice,
he got $3.5 million.
It is not true.
Oh, really?
Mr. President, it's an open discussion, please.
It's a fact.
Well, you have raised an issue. Let the Vice President answer.
Discredited.
Did Burisma pay him $183,000 a month with no experience in energy?
Mr. President,
my son did nothing wrong at Burisma.
I think he did.
Mr. President, let him answer.
He doesn't want to let me answer because he knows I have the truth. His position has been totally, thoroughly discredited.
By who?
And Ukraine.
The media?
By everybody. Well, by the media, by our allies, by the World Bank, by everyone has discredited. Matter of fact, even the people who testified under oath.
So let me ask you this, Joe.
No, go ahead, Mr. I'm listening to you.
He got
$3.5 million from Moscow.
He testified under oath in his administration, said, I did my job and I did it very well.
Oh,
I
really?
did it
I'd
honorably.
like to know who they are.
Well, I'll give you the list of the people who testified.
No, go ahead, sir.
Sure, you've already fired most of them because they did a good job.
Some people don't do a good job. with you.
Go ahead. Wait a minute. You get the final word, Mr.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown. Excuse me.
Hey, let me just say to you.
No. I'm Mr. President.
$3.5 million, Joe.
That is simply
Why did he
not true.
deserve $3.5 million from Moscow?
Look, here's the deal. We want to talk about families and ethics. I don't want to do that. I mean, his family we could talk about all night. His family's already...
My family lost a fortune by coming down and helping us with government.
And that's such a...
Mr. President. Every single one of them lost a fortune.
This is not about my family or his family. It's about your family. The American people. He doesn't... That's not true. It doesn't want to talk about what you need. You, the American people. It's about you. That's what we're talking about here.
All right, that's the end of the segment. We're moving on.
He didn't take them.
Well,
Vice President,
no. Can I be honest? It's a very important
question. Try to be honest.
He stood up.
No, the answer to the question is no.
Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion, if you
that
get rid
is
of
absolutely
you know what, you're
not
true.
true.
Doing it.
You're going to
not
have
true,
gentlemen. I hate to raise my voice, but it seems to be. Why should I be different than the two of you? So here's the deal.
Good point.
We have 6 segments. We have ended that segment. We're going to go to the next segment. In that segment, you each are going to have 2 uninterrupted moments. In those 2 uninterrupted minutes, Mr. President, you can say anything you want. I'm going to ask a question about race, but if you want to answer about something else, go ahead. But I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting than he has.
That's all right, but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less than
plenty.
No, less than you have. Let's please continue on. The issue of race. Vice President Biden, you say that President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville 3 years ago, when he talked about very fine people on both sides, was what directly led you to launch this run for president.
Oh, yeah, sure.
President Trump, you have often said that you believe you have done more for Black Americans than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. My question for the two of you is, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4 years? Vice President Biden, you go first.
It's about equity and equality. It's about decency. It's about the Constitution. And we have never walked away from trying to require equity for everyone, equality for the whole of America. But we've never accomplished it. But we've never walked away from it like he has done. It is true. The reason I got in the race is when those people, close your eyes, remember what those people look like coming out of the fields carrying torches, their veins bulging, spewing anti-Semitic bile, and accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan. A young woman got killed. And they asked the president what he thought. He said there were very fine people on both sides. No president has ever said anything like that.
It is whose
now,
sir.
Second point I'd make to you is that when Floyd was killed, when Mr. Floyd was killed, there was a peaceful protest in front of the White House. What did he do? He came out of his bunker, had the military use tear gas on him so he could walk across to a church and hold up a Bible. And then what happened after that? The bishop of that very church said that it was a disgrace. The general who was with him said all he ever wants to do is divide people, not unite people at all. This is a president who has used everything as a dog whistle to try to generate racist hatred, racist division. This is a man who, in fact, you talk about helping African Americans. 1 in 1,000 African Americans has been killed because of the coronavirus. And if he doesn't do something quickly, by the end of the year, 1 in 500 will have been killed. 1 in 500 African Americans. This man is the savior of African Americans. This man cares at all. This man's done virtually nothing. Look, the fact is that you have to look at what he talks about. You have to look at what he did. And what he did has been disastrous for the African-American community.
So,
President Trump, you have 2 minutes. Why should Americans trust you over your opponent to deal with racism?
He did a crime bill, 1994, where you call them super predators, African Americans, the super predators, and they've never forgotten it. They've never forgotten it, Joe.
No, sir, it's his 2 minutes.
So you did that, and they call you a super predator, and I'm letting people out of jail now that you have treated the African American population community. You have treated the black community about as bad as anybody in this country. You did the 1990s, and that's why, if you look at the polls, I'm doing better than any Republican has done in a long time, because they saw what you did. You call them super predators, and you've called them worse than that, because you look back at your testimony over the years, you've called them a lot worse than that. As far as the church is concerned, and as far as the generals are concerned, we just got the support of 250 military leaders and generals, total support. Law enforcement, almost every law enforcement group in the United States. I have Florida, I have Texas, I have Ohio, I have Portland. The sheriff just came out today and he said, I support President Trump. I don't think you have any law enforcement. You can't even say the word law enforcement, because if you say those words, you're going to lose all of your radical left supporters. And why aren't you saying those words, Joe? Why don't you say the words law enforcement? Because you know what? If they called us in Portland, we would put out that fire in a half an hour, but they won't do it because they're run by radical left Democrats. If you look at Chicago, if you look at any place you want to look, Seattle, they heard we were coming in the following day, and they put up their hands, and we got back Seattle. Minneapolis, we got it back, Joe, because we believe in law and order, but you don't. The top 10 cities and just about the top 40 cities are run by Democrats and, in many cases, radical left. And they've got you wrapped around their finger, Joe, to a point where you don't want to say anything about law and order. And I'll tell you what, the people of this country want and demand law and order, and you're afraid to even say it.
All right. I want to return to the question of race. Vice President Biden, after the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case decided not to charge any of the police with homicide, you said it raises the question, quote, whether justice could be equally applied in America. Do you believe that there is a separate but unequal system of justice for blacks in this country?
Yes, there is. There's systemic injustice in this country, in education and work and in law enforcement and the way in which it's enforced. But look, the vast majority of police officers are good, decent, honorable men and women. They risk their lives every day to take care of us. But there are some bad apples. And when they occur, when they find them, they have to be sorted out. They have to be held accountable. They have to be held accountable. And what I'm going to do as President of the United States is call together an entire group of people at the White House, well, everything from the civil rights groups to the police officers, to the police chiefs, and we're going to work this out. We're going to work this out so we change the way in which we have more transparency in when these things happen. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to George Floyd. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to Breonna Taylor. Most don't like it. But we have to have a system where people are held accountable. And by the way, violence in response is never appropriate. Never appropriate. Peaceful protest is. Violence is never appropriate.
All right.
What is peaceful protest? When they run through the middle of a town and burn down your stores and kill people all over the place,
that
and you
is
say
not
peaceful protest?
President Trump,
No, it's
I'm not asking.
but you say it is.
President Trump, I'd like to continue with the
Yes,
issue
go
of
ahead,
race. I
please.
promise we're going to get to the issue of law and order
Please.
in a moment.
Fine.
This month, your administration directed federal agencies to end racial sensitivity training that addresses white privilege or critical race theory. Why did you decide to do that, to end racial sensitivity training? And do you believe that there is systemic racism in this country, sir?
I ended it because it's racist. I ended it because a lot of people were complaining that they were asked to do things that were absolutely insane, that it was a radical revolution that was taking place in our military, in our schools, all over the place, and you know it, and so does everybody else. And he would know.
What is radical about racial sensitivity training, sir?
If you were a certain person, you had no status in life. It was sort of a reversal. And if you look at the people, we were paying people hundreds of thousands of dollars to teach very bad ideas and, frankly, very sick ideas. And really, they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that to happen. We have to go back to the core values of this country. They were teaching people that our country is a horrible place, it's a racist place, and they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to allow that to happen.
Vice President Biden?
Nobody's doing that. He's the racist.
You just don't know.
Here's the deal. I know a lot more about this than he does.
Let him finish.
The fact is that there is racial insensitivity. People have to be made aware of what other people feel like, what insults them, what is demeaning to them. It's important to people know they don't want to. Many people don't want to hurt other people's feelings, but it makes a big difference. It makes a gigantic difference in the way a child is able to grow up and have a sense of self-esteem. It's a little bit like how this guy and his friends look down on so many people. They look down their nose on people like Irish Catholics like me and grew up in Scranton. They look down on people who don't have money. They look down on people who are of a different faith. They look down on people who are a different color. In fact, we're all Americans. The only way we're going to bring this country together is bring everybody together. There's nothing we cannot do if we do it together. We can take this on and we can defeat racism in America.
President Trump, sir.
During the Obama-Biden administration, there was tremendous division. There was hatred. You look at Ferguson, you go to many places. Look at Oakland. Look what happened in Oakland. Look what happened in Baltimore. Look what happened. Frankly, it was more violent than what I'm even seeing now.
Oh, my
but
Lord.
The reason is that
ridiculous.
the Democrats that run these
Absolutely
cities
ridiculous.
don't want to talk like you about law and order.
Violent
and you
crime,
still haven't mentioned.
violent
Are you in
crime.
favor of law and order?
I'm in favor of law. You follow
Are you in favor of law and order? Go
yes,
ahead,
I'm
say
in
it.
favor.
You asked a
Everybody's in favor
question,
of
let him finish.
Law and order.
Law and order.
Let him answer.
Law and order with justice, where people get treated fairly. Okay. And the fact of the matter is, violent crime went down 15% in our administration.
All right.
It's gone up on his watch.
Went down much more in ours.
All right, we're now. Mr. President, you're going to. Mr. President,
every record in the
Mr.
book.
President, you're going to be very happy because we're now going to talk about law and order.
Places we had trouble were Democratic-run cities.
That's exactly my question. There has been a dramatic increase in homicides in America this summer, particularly, and you often blame that on Democratic mayors and Democratic governors, but in fact, there have been equivalent spikes in Republican-led cities like Tulsa and Fort Worth. So the question is this really a party issue?
I think it's a party issue. You can bring in a couple of examples, but if you look at Chicago, what's going on in Chicago, where 53 people were shot and 8 died shot. If you look at New York, where it's going up like nobody's ever seen anything, the numbers are going up 100, 150, 200%. Crime. It is crazy what's going on. And he doesn't want to say law and order because he can't, because he'll lose his radical left supporters. And once he does that, it's over with. But if he ever got to run this country and they ran it the way he would want to run it, our suburbs would be gone. By the way, our suburbs would be gone, and you would see problems like you've never seen.
He would know a suburb unless he took a wrong turn.
Oh, I know suburbs.
He would not.
So much
Go ahead. Wait a minute.
I was raised in the suburbs. This is not 1950. All these dog whistles and racism don't work anymore. Suburbs are by and large integrated. There's many people today driving their kids to soccer practice and/or to black and white and Hispanic in the same car as there have been any time in the past. What really is a threat to the suburbs and their safety is his failure to deal with COVID. They're dying in the suburbs. His failure to deal with the environment. They're being flooded. They're being burned out because his refusal to do anything. That's why the suburbs are in trouble.
I do want to talk about this issue of law and order, though. And in the joint recommendation that came from the Biden-Bernie Sanders task force, you talked about, quote, reimagining policing. Yeah. First of all, what does reimagining policing mean, and do you support?
It means.
Let me, if I might finish the question. What does reimagining policing mean, and do you support the Black Lives Matter call for community control of policing?
Look, what I support is the police having the opportunity to deal with the problems they face. And I'm totally opposed to defunding the police offices. As a matter of fact, local police, the only one defunding it, his budget calls for a $400 million cut in local law enforcement assistance. They need more assistance. They need, when they show up for a 9/11 call, to have someone with them as a psychologist or psychiatrist to keep them from having to use force and be able to talk people down. We have to have community policing like we had before, where the officers get to know the people in the communities. That's when crime went down. It didn't go up, it went down. And so we have to be engaged.
That's not what they're talking about, Chris. That's not what they're talking about. He's talking about defunding the police.
That is not true.
He doesn't have any law support. Look, he has no law enforcement support.
That's not true.
Almost nothing.
Look.
Oh, really? Who do you have? Name one group that supports you. Name one group that came out and supported you. Go
Look,
ahead.
look.
Think. We have time.
We don't have time to do
No,
anything.
think
So
about
listen,
it.
look,
Name
folks,
one law enforcement group that came out and
I
supported
think, gentlemen,
you,
I think
Joe.
I'm going to take back the
There aren't.
moderator's
I don't
role,
think there
and
are any.
I want to get to another subject, which is the issue of protests in many cities that have turned violent. In Portland, Oregon, especially, we had more than 100 straight days of protests, which I think you would agree. You talk about peaceful protests. Many of those turned into riots. Mr. Vice President, you say that people who commit crimes should be held accountable. The question I have, though, is as the Democratic nominee, and earlier tonight you said that you are the Democratic Party right now, have you ever called the Democratic mayor of Portland or the Democratic governor of Oregon and said, hey, you got to stop this, bring in the National Guard, do whatever it takes, but you stop the days and months of violence in Portland?
I don't hold public office now. I am a former vice president. I've made it clear. I've made it clear in my public statements that the violence should be prosecuted. It should be prosecuted, and anyone who commits it.
But you've never called for the people, the leader. Excuse me, sir. You had never called for the leaders in Portland and in Oregon to bring in the National Guard and knock off 100 days of riots.
They can, in fact, take care of it if he just stay out of the way. Look here.
Oh, really?
Here,
oh, really?
Here's the thing.
I sent in the U.S. Marshals to get the killer
No,
of the young man in the middle of the street. They shot him, and for 3 days,
President Trump,
Portland wouldn't do anything. I had to send in the U.S. Marshals. They took care of business.
Go ahead, sir.
And by the way, you know, his own former spokesperson said, you know, riots and chaos and violence help his cause. That's what this is all about.
I don't know who said that.
I do.
Who?
I think Kellyanne Conway.
I don't think she said that.
She said that.
don't.
And so here's the But here's the point. The point is that that's what he keeps trying to rile everything up. He doesn't want to calm things down. Instead of going in and talking to people and saying, let's get everybody together, figure out how to deal with this. What's he do? He just pours gasoline in the fire constantly, and every single solitary time.
And to end this, button up this segment, I'm going to give you a minute to answer, sir. You have repeatedly criticized.
Wait, I have to answer his statement.
No, you have
His
repeatedly.
statement. Wait,
you have
just 1
No,
second.
you've been talking
You
back
made
and
a
forth.
statement.
I'm asking you.
I would love to
you know,
end it.
sir.
I would love to end it. and
You know,
we
if
would
you want to
very-
switch seats.
We would very quickly.
We could do that, but
I'd send in the National Guard, it would be over. There'd be no problem.
Okay,
But they
good.
don't want to accept the National Guard.
You have repeatedly criticized the vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other left-wing
That's right.
extremist groups. But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
Are you
I'm willing
prepared to
do
specifically
that, but
do it?
Well,
I
go
would
ahead,
say
sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name. Go ahead.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem.
His
This
own
is a left-wing.
FBI director
This
said
is a
the threat
left-wing
of
problem.
white supremacists. Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you gotta be
not
kidding.
militia. That's what
Oh, really?
his
It's an idea.
FBI. His
Okay.
FBI director
Gentlemen,
said.
Well, then you know what?
No,
He's
we're
wrong.
done, sir. We're moving on to the next. We're
When
moving.
a bat hits you over the head, that's not an idea.
Everybody in
Antifa
your
is bad.
administration tells you the truth has a bad idea.
Can I tell you what?
You have no ideas that are
Antifa is a dangerous,
All right,
radical
gentlemen,
group.
we're now moving on to the Trump
And
and
you ought to be
Biden
careful with
records.
them. They'll overthrow you.
When
in
a
2
president,
seconds.
I'm going to ask a question. When the president seeks a second term, it is generally a referendum on his record. But Vice President Biden, you like to quote one of your dad's sayings, which is, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And in this case, sir, you are the alternative. Looking at both of your records, I'm going to ask each of you, why should voters elect you president over your opponent? In this segment, President Trump, you go first, 2 minutes.
Because there has never been an administration or president who has done more than I've done in a period of 3.5 years. And that's despite the impeachment hoax. And you saw what happened today with Hillary Clinton, where it was a whole big con job. But despite going through all of these things, where I had to fight both flanks and behind me and above, There has never been an administration that's done what I've done. The greatest, before COVID came in, the greatest economy in history, lowest unemployment numbers. Everything was good. Everything was going. And by the way, there was unity going to happen. People were calling me for the first time in years. They were calling and they were saying, it's time maybe. And then what happened? We got hit, but now we're building it back up again. A rebuilding of the military, including Space Force and all of the other things. A fixing of the VA, which was a mess under him. 308,000 people died because they didn't have proper health care. It was a mess. And we now got a 91% approval rating at the VA, our vets. We take care of our vets. But we've rebuilt our military. The job that we've done, and I'll tell you something, some people say maybe the most important. By the end of the first term, I'll have approximately 300 federal judges and Court of Appeals judges, 300, and hopefully 3 great Supreme Court justices. That is a record, the likes of which very few people, and you know one of the reasons I'll have so many judges? Because President Obama and him left me 128 judges to fill. When you leave office, you don't leave any judges. That's like you just don't do that. They left 128 openings, and if I were a member of his party, because they have a little different philosophy, I'd say if you left us 128 openings, you can't be a good president, you can't be a good vice president. But I want to thank you because it gives us almost, it'll probably be above that number by the end of this term. 300 judges, it's a record.
Looking at both of your records, why should voters elect you president as opposed to President Trump? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Under this president, we become weaker, sicker, poorer, more divided, and more violent. When I was vice president, we inherited a recession. I was asked to fix it. I did. We left him a booming economy, and he caused the recession. With regard to being weaker, the fact is that I've gone head-to-head with Putin and made it clear to him we're not going to take any of his stuff. He's Putin's puppy. He still refuses to even say anything to Putin about the bounty on the heads of American soldiers.
Your son got $3.5 million.
And by the way, my son...
Wait a minute. Mr. President, your campaign agreed to both sides would get 2-minute answers uninterrupted. Well, your side agreed to it, and why don't you observe what your campaign agreed to as a ground rule, okay, sir?
He never keeps his word.
Can
No, I'm not asking. That was a rhetorical question.
Can you
Go
add
ahead,
back
sir.
30 seconds?
Yeah, yes,
okay.
you may have.
All right.
Go ahead.
So, thirdly, we're poor. The billionaires have gotten much more wealthy by a tune of over $300 to $400 billion more just since COVID. You in the home, you got less. You're in more trouble than you were before. In terms of being more violent, when we were in office, there were 15% less violence in America than there is today. He's president of the United States. It's on his watch. And with regard to more divided, the nation can't stay divided. We can't be this way. And speaking of my son, the way you talk about the military, the way you talk about them being losers and being and just being suckers. My son was in Iraq. He spent a year there. He got the Bronze Star. He got the Conspicuous Service Medal. He was not a loser. He was a patriot, and the people left behind there were heroes.
Really?
And I resent.
Are you talking
like
about
hell.
Hunter? Are you talking about
I'm talking about my son, Beau Biden. You're talking about.
I don't know Beau. I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter
you know Beau.
Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. He wasn't dishonorably.
Cocaine use. And he didn't have a job until you became vice president. And once you became vice president, he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
that is simply
and various
not
other places.
True.
He made a fortune.
My son.
And he didn't have a job.
My son, like a lot of people we know at home, had a drug problem. He's overtaken it. He's fixed it. He's worked on it, and I'm proud of him.
But why was he given tens of millions of dollars?
But he wasn't given tens of millions of dollars. That is totally discredited.
We've already been
totally discredited.
We've already been through this. I think the American people would rather hear about more substantial subjects. Well, you know, as the moderator, sir, I'm going to make a judgment call here.
Gets $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow.
Let's talk about
not true.
Gentlemen,
that report is totally discredited.
Mitt
Romney on that committee said it wasn't worth taxpayers' money, that report. It was written for political reasons.
You know, I'd like to talk about climate change.
So would I.
Okay. The forest fires in the West are raging now. They have burned millions of acres. They have displaced hundreds of thousands of people. When state officials there blame the fires on climate change, Mr. President, you said, I don't think the science knows. Over your 4 years, you have pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. You have rolled back a number of Obama environmental records. What do you believe about the science of climate change, and what will you do in the next 4 years to confront it?
I want crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful, clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally. But I haven't destroyed our businesses. Our businesses aren't put out of commission. If you look at the Paris Accord, it was a disaster from our standpoint. And people are actually very happy about what's going on because our businesses are doing well. As far as the fires are concerned, you need forest management in addition to everything else. The forest floors are loaded up with trees, dead trees that are years old, and they're like tinder, and leaves and everything else. You drop a cigarette in there, the whole forest burns down. You've got to have forest management.
What do you
You've got to have cuts.
What do you believe about the science of climate change, sir?
I believe that we have to do everything we can to have immaculate air, immaculate water, and do whatever else we can that's good. You know, we're planting 1 billion trees, the Billion Tree Project, and it's very exciting for a lot of people.
You believe that human pollution, greenhouse gas emissions contributes to the global warming of this planet?
I think a lot of things do, but I think to an extent, yes. I think to an extent, yes. But I also think we have to do better management of our forests. Every year, I get the call, California's burning. California's burning. If that was cleaned, if you had forest management, good forest management, you wouldn't be getting those calls. You know, in Europe, they have forest cities. They're called forest cities. They maintain their forests. They manage their forests. I was with the head of a major country. It's a forest city. He said, sir, we have trees that are far more, they ignite much easier than California. There shouldn't be that problem. I spoke with the governor about it. I'm getting along very well with the governor. But I said, you know, at some point, you can't every year have hundreds of thousands of acres of land just burned to the ground. That's burning down because of a lack of management.
But, sir, if you believe in the science of climate change, why have you rolled back the Obama Clean Power Plan, which limited carbon emissions in power plants? Why have you relaxed?
Because it was driving energy prices through the sky.
Why have you relaxed fuel economy standards that are going to create more pollution from cars and trucks?
Well, not really, because what's happening is the car is much less expensive and it's a much safer car, and you're talking about a tiny difference. And then what would happen, because of the cost of the car, you would have at least double and triple the number of cars purchased. We have the old slugs out there that are 10, 12 years old. If you did that, the car would be safer. It would be much cheaper by $3,500.
In the case of California, they've simply ignored
No, but you would take a lot of cars
rollback
off the market because people would be able to afford a car. Now, and by the way, we're going to see how that turns out. But a lot of people agree with me, many people. The car has gotten so expensive because they have computers all over the place for an extra little bit of gasoline. And I'm okay with electric cars, too. I think I'm all for electric cars. I've given big incentives for electric cars. But what they've done in California is just crazy.
Right. Vice President Biden, I'd like you to respond to the president's climate change record, but I also want to ask you about a concern. You proposed $2 trillion in green jobs. You talk about new limits, not abolishing, but new limits on fracking, ending the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity by 2035, and zero net emission of greenhouse gases by 2050. The president says a lot of these things would tank the economy and cost millions of jobs.
He's absolutely wrong, number one. Number two, if in fact, during our administration, the Recovery Act, I was in charge, able to bring down the cost of renewable energy to cheaper than or as cheap as coal and gas and oil. Nobody's going to build another coal-fired plant in America. No one's going to build another oil-fired plant in America. They're going to move to renewable energy, number one. Number two, we're going to make sure that we are able to take the federal fleet and turn it into a fleet that's run on their electric vehicles. Making sure that we can do that, we're going to put 500,000 charging stations and all of the highways that we're going to be building in the future. We're going to build an economy that, in fact, is going to provide for the ability us to take 4 million buildings and make sure that they, in fact, are weatherized in a way that, in fact, they'll emit significantly less gas and oil because the heat will not be going out. There's so many things that we can do now to create thousands and thousands of jobs. We can get to net zero in terms of energy production by 2035. Not only not costing people jobs, creating millions of good paying jobs, not $15 an hour, but prevailing wage, by having a new infrastructure that, in fact, is green. And the first thing I will do, I will rejoin the Paris Accord. I will join the Paris Accord because with us out of it, look what's happening. It's all falling apart. And talk about someone who has no relationship with foreign policy. Brazil, the rainforests of Brazil are being torn down, are being ripped down. More carbon is absorbed in that rainforest than every bit of carbon that's emitted in the United States. Instead of doing something about that, I would be gathering up and making sure we had the countries of the world coming up with $20 billion and say, here's $20 billion. Stop tearing down the forest. And if you don't, then you're going to have significant economic consequences.
What about the argument that President Trump basically says that you have to balance environmental interests and economic interests, and he's drawn his line?
Well, he hadn't drawn a line. He still, for example, makes sure that he wants to make sure that methane's not a problem. You can now emit more methane without it being a problem. Methane. This is a guy who says that you don't have to have mileage standards for automobiles that exist now. This is a guy who says that, well, the fact that it's all true. And here's the deal.
He's talking about the Green New Deal, and it's not $2 billion or $20 billion, as you said. It's $100 trillion.
I'm talking about
where they want to rip down buildings and rebuild the building.
No,
it's the dumbest, most ridiculous. Where airplanes are out of business, where two-car systems are out, where they want to take out the cows too. That's not true either, right? This is a $100 trillion. Look, that's more money than our country could make in 100 years if we're going to
the case.
All right, let me destroy our country. I actually, wait a minute, sir. I actually have studied your plan, and it includes upgrading 4 million buildings, weatherizing 2 million homes over 4 years, building 1.5 million energy-efficient homes. So the question becomes, the president is saying, I think some people who support the president would say that sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money and hurt the economy.
What it's going to do is going to create thousands and millions of jobs, good-paying jobs.
Let him finish, sir.
He doesn't know how to do that.
$100 billion.
The fact is, it's going to create millions of good-paying jobs, and these tax incentives for people to weatherize, which he wants to get rid of. It's going to make the economy much safer. Look how much we're paying now to deal with the hurricanes. By the way, he has an answer for hurricanes. He said maybe we should drop a nuclear weapon on them. They may.
I never said that. At all.
He did say.
You made it up.
And here's the deal.
You make up.
We are going to be in a position where we can create hard, good jobs by making sure the environment is clean and we all are in better shape. We spend billions of dollars now, on floods, hurricanes, rising seas. We're in real trouble. Look what's happened just in the Midwest with these storms that come through and wipe out entire sections and counties in Iowa. They didn't happen before. They're because of global warming. We make up 15% of the world's problem. But the rest of the world, we've got to get them to come along. That's why we have to get back into the Paris Accord.
All right, gentlemen.
Wait a minute, Chris. So why didn't he do it for 47 years? You were vice president. Why didn't you get the world? China sends up real dirt into the air. Russia does. India does. They all do. We're supposed to be good. And by the way, he made a couple of statements. The Green New Deal is $100 trillion.
That is
not
not
$20
my
billion.
plan.
That's
the Green New
you want to rebuild
Deal
every
is
building.
Not my plan.
You want to rebuild every.
If he knew anything about,
he made a statement about the military. He said I said something about the military. He and his friends made it up, and then they went with it. I never said it.
Okay.
That is
what
not
he
true.
did
Sir,
is he
you're done in
said
this segment.
he called the military
Mr. Vice President,
stupid bastards.
I
and he
did
said
not
it on
say
tape. He said
Mr.
stupid
Please,
bastards. He
sir,
said it.
stop.
I would never
I
say
would
that
Play
to
it.
the military.
Play it.
Go ahead.
You're
Mr.
on
Vice
tape.
President answered his final question.
The final question is, I can't remember which of all his rantings.
I'm having a little trouble myself. But and about the economy and about this question of what it's going to cost.
The economy.
I mean, the Green New Deal and the idea of what your environmental changes will do.
The Green New Deal will pay for itself as we move forward. We're not going to build plants that, in fact, are great polluting plants.
So do you
We're going to
support
build
the Green New Deal?
Pardon me?
Do you support that?
No, I don't support the Green New
Oh,
Deal.
you don't? Oh, well, that's a big statement.
I
That
support
means you
the
just lost the radical left.
I
Oh,
support
you
the
don't.
Biden plan that I put forward.
Okay.
The Biden plan, which is different than what he calls the radical Green New Deal.
All right, gentlemen, final segment, election integrity. As we meet tonight, millions of Americans are receiving mail-in ballots or going to vote early. How confident should we be that this will be a fair election? And what are you prepared to do over the next 5+ weeks, because it'll not only be to Election Day, but also counting some ballots, mail-in ballots after Election Day. What are you prepared to do to reassure the American people that the next president will be the legitimate winner of this election? In this final segment, Mr. Vice President, you go first.
Prepared to let people vote. They should go to iwillvote.com. Decide how they're going to vote, when they're going to vote, and what means by which they're going to vote. His own Homeland Security Director, and as well as the FBI Director, says there is no evidence at all that mail-in ballots are a source of being manipulated and cheating. They said that. The fact is that there are going to be millions of people because of COVID that are going to be voting by mail-in ballots, like he does, by the way. He sits behind the Resolute desk and sends his ballot to Florida, number one. Number two, we're going to make sure that those people who want to vote in person are able to vote because enough poll watchers are there to make sure they can socially distance. The polls are open on time, and the polls stay open until the votes are counted. And this is all about trying to dissuade people from voting because he's trying to scare people into thinking that it's not going to be legitimate. Show up and vote. You will determine the outcome of this election. Vote, vote, vote. If you're able to vote early in your state, vote early. If you're able to vote in person, vote in person. Vote whatever way is the best way for you, because he cannot stop you from being able to determine the outcome of this election. And in terms of whether or not when the votes are counted, and they're all counted, that will be accepted. If I win, that will be accepted. If I lose, that'll be accepted. But by the way, if in fact he says he's not sure what he's going to accept, well, let me tell you something. It doesn't matter, because if we get the votes, it's going to be all over. He's going to go. He can't stay in power. It won't happen. It won't happen. So vote. Just make sure you understand you have it in your control to determine what this country is going to look like the next 4 years. Is it going to change, or you get 4 more years of these lies?
Mr. President, 2 minutes.
So when I listened to Joe talking about a transition, there's been no transition from when I won. I won that election. And if you look at crooked Hillary Clinton, if you look at all of the different people, there was no transition, because they came after me trying to do a coup. They came after me spying on my campaign. They started from the day I won, and even before I won, from the day I came down the escalator with our First Lady. They were a disaster. They were a disgrace to our country. And we've caught them. We've caught them all. We've got it all on tape. We've caught them all. And by the way, you gave the idea for the Logan Act against General Flynn. You better take a look at that, because we caught you in a sense. And President Obama was sitting in the office. He knew about it too. So don't tell me about a free transition. As far as the ballots are concerned, it's a disaster. A solicited ballot, okay, solicited is okay. You're soliciting, you're asking, they send it back, you send it back. I did that. If you have an unsolicited, they're sending millions of ballots all over the country. There's fraud. They found them in creeks. They found some with the name Trump, just happened to have the name Trump just the other day in a waste paper basket. They're being sent all over the place. They sent 2 in a Democrat area. They sent out 1,000 ballots. Everybody got 2 ballots. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. The other thing, it's nice on November 3rd, you're watching and you see who won the election. And I think we're going to do well because people are really happy with the job we've done. But you know what? We won't know. We might not know for months because these ballots are going to be all over. Take a look at what happened in Manhattan. Take a look at what happened in New Jersey. Take a look at what happened in Virginia and other places. They're not losing 2%, 1%, which, by the way, is too much. An election could be won or lost with that. They're losing 30 and 40%. It's a fraud, and it's a shame. And can you imagine where they say you have to have your ballot in by November 10th? November 10th. That means that's 7 days after the election, in theory, should have been announced.
Okay.
We have major states with that,
sir,
all run by Democrats.
2 minutes is 2 minutes.
All run by Democrats. It's
President Trump,
it's a rigged election.
You're going to be able to continue. You have been charging for months that mail-in balloting is going to be a disaster. You say it's rigged, that it's going to lead to fraud. But in 2018, in the last midterm election, 31 million people voted mail-in voting. That was a quarter, more than a quarter, of all the voters that year cast their ballots by mail. Now that millions of mail-in ballots have gone out, what are you going to do about it? And are you counting on the Supreme Court, including a Justice Barrett, to settle any dispute?
Yeah, I think I'm counting on them to look at the ballots, definitely. I hope we don't need them in terms of the election itself. But for the ballots, I think so. Because what's happening is incredible. I read today, where at least 1% of the ballots for 2016 were invalidated. They take them, we don't like them, we don't like them.
But what are you going to do about it? There are millions of ballots going out right now.
What you do is you go and vote. You do a solicited ballot, and that's okay, or you go and vote.
I'm asking you.